All right. Well, I guess we'll do this today. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
yeah. I gotta figure out what's wrong with my headphones for sure. So okay. Well,
All right.
we ready to do this?
You betcha.
All right. I tell you, I feel naked without my headset on. I've lost some of my aesthetic beauty.
Right. Not quite the same Montag.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. With my new haircut and my new shorn sides.
Santa? Your
All
beard's
right.
getting bigger there, buddy.
What is?
Said your
Yeah,
beard looks like it's getting bigger. You're
yeah.
throwing her out more, huh?
It's
Nice.
this part. Yeah, I'm keeping the sides shaped.
Yeah.
Just throwing this out.
Yeah, let that go along and then braid it. It'd be like a Scotty Ian braid right down to here, like
Yeah,
to your
like
belly and
like
everything.
Michael Gilbert.
Yeah, man. Make it
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. It's just it's there to cover my ugliness, but
I'm gonna miss cuddle time though. It just ain't gonna be the same. You're gonna be all
it
skitty.
will always be cuddle time.
Spoon me, Montag. Spoon
That's
me.
right. That's right. I'll still generate enough heat for our manly embrace.
Uh, all right. Getting into character.
Yeah, that's good. When we do our long form podcasts here on Heavy Metal Horror, we need hydration. Here's what I like to use: Hydro Flask. Hydro Flask.
Il
See,
Hydro Flask.
yeah, seize the moisture. All right. Hell, Hydro Flask. That's great.
That is awesome.
All right, man. Let's get the show on the road.
All right.
This is Jarvis Leatherby from the heavy metal band Night Demon. You're listening to Heavy Metal Horror.
I am Montag, master of illusion. What goes up must come down. Not always.
Hey, this is Choptop. Stay tuned and stay glued because this one's gonna be horroric.
And you are watching and listening to Heavy Metal Horror. Well, kiddies, I feel pretty naked today because my headset's not working, so I don't know how loud I have to talk into my beautiful webcam microphone. So here it is. We're doing it anyway. Today we've got a pretty fun show. It's fun and it's horror. We're talking about comedy horror or horror comedies, horromedies, movies that have elements of both horror and comedy in them, which it's really hard sometimes, I think, to cross those genres successfully. Let's talk about these. I know Chop Top and I both love these horror comedies. Wouldn't you say, Chop?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think my earliest recollection of one, and we'll get to it, I'm sure, and we've had a whole show about it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. I mean, that was probably one of my earliest recollections of maybe the foray of horror comedies. I'm sure before that, I saw some black and whites and, other things like that from the classic Universal lines. I just don't quite recall it. My earliest recollection is, of course, with Texas Chainsaw Part 2.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, it's definitely on the list. I got a whole bunch of them here that combine these elements of horror and comedy. And I know some movies try to do that, but they're not very successful.
Right.
And it's not something that can be always done. You tend to skew one way or another, but when you can blend the two, it can make for a really entertaining movie.
Absolutely.
And for the horror fans, having some comedy, a little bit of levity. I mean, good horror movies sometimes have comedy in them anyway. Kind of eases the tension. That serves a purpose. You gotta take some of the tension away from the scenes. But then also having a horror elements in a comedy also, it's an interesting mix of genres, which you don't always find. Always having a success. I'm just really completely fucked up without these headphones on. I should get rid of them.
I can see it.
Yeah, I'm like,
Who am I?
Who am I? Yeah.
You are
Hey,
Montag.
can they hear me? I don't know what's going on. Yeah, and so I totally get it. And I was also really thinking of another movie that I forgot to put on the list. So I've got a bunch up here.
Well, it also goes over the line, and we can talk about this too, into television.
Sure.
I'm wearing a classic example of my favorite horror comedy show ever.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, I know you're an Addams Family man. So, yeah, it goes right into that. It goes right over to television as well at times.
It certainly does. And that's a good point, because we grew up watching these. I always loved the Addams Family, and I liked the Munsters. I wasn't as much of a fan, but I'd always watch it because I liked monsters. You know, and having that blend of the fish out of water is the concept that pushes the monsters, because after a while people just don't pay attention to Herman showing up for work, and things like that. So with these kind of characters in a kind of comical twist, that's what makes it kind of fun. And I remember as a kid, like early on, I was probably 4, 5, 6 years old. I used to have these monster cards. They had like Universal monsters and other monsters on them, but then they had funny captions on them.
I think I remember some of those as well.
Yeah, I don't remember like all the little jokes, but they were like really bad, like dad jokes. Like there was the picture of the mummy, and he's like, "I wrapped something for you for Christmas myself," stuff like that. And as a kid, I just loved it. Because I'm like, it's got monsters, it's got funny stuff. Like, what more do you want? But
and I'm glad you talk about the classic monsters, and we get on that subject, because I guess for one film I'm going to bring up, I'll bring it up right now, probably my all-time favorite horror comedy, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I can watch that any day of the week, any time of the year. I fell asleep to it before. It's just this feeling of such nostalgia. And it's such a great film. You got, of course, the physical comedy, of Lou Costello and Bud Abbott, and just that interaction that they have, that interplay. Plus, you got the classic monsters. You got Dracula, the Wolfman, and you got Frankenstein all in one movie with that comedy. And it's such a warm, nostalgic horror comedy to me, and I love that film.
Yeah, and those films kind of reinvigorated Universal's horror movies. Because they were done in the 50s, and pretty much by then, they were done with those classic monsters. In the 50s, Universal was doing like Creature from the Black Lagoon, so those monsters were kind of hadn't been done and had a movie for a while. And so Abbott and Costello brought them back into kind of a level of popularity that they hadn't had before, and it also helped their careers as well. So they were, this was kind of toward their sweet spot in the 40s and 50s. I remember watching Abbott Costello Meet the Mummy. That one actually scared me as a kid, because I was afraid of the mummy so much. I knew there was funny stuff. I knew it was supposed to be funny, but I think because they used the scary music, the intense music, and also with Costello's overacting and like being horrified, I empathized with his plight. Like, oh my God, if I was right there and the mummy or Frankenstein was right there, I'd be pissing my pants, So I totally get that. So I like those movies too. I can watch them now and not be so scared of the mummy. But those are the early ones I remember. Just still
you'll be yelling out, chick.
Yeah. Because I
actually got the whole collection. They did, I believe, was there 4 features?
They did. I think
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the Mummy.
Yeah.
Of course, Frankenstein, and I can't remember the 4th. There was a 4th.
And the Invisible Man.
Yes, that one. Those are fun. All of them.
Yeah,
but man, that one. Meet Frankenstein's my favorite.
Frankenstein, I think, is the best one of the bunch. I didn't really care for the Invisible Man. I don't really like the Invisible Man anyway. So I just like. The first one's a good movie. It's done well with Claude Rains.
Yes.
It's just not an appeal to me like the other monsters are,
And it's almost like it's not in classic nature, anyways, of a monster. It's just a man who gets invisible.
Right. It's the mad scientist.
It angers him as time goes on.
Yeah, the mad scientist. It's like a slow burning Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
We just can't see him when he's Mr. Hyde. I guess he's Hyde, Hide. Right. Yeah, and I got another one to. Oh my God. See, I'm glad that we're talking about that because I'm adding a cartoon to our list that I think we both enjoyed as a kid. Speaking of, I mean, we might as well, since we're talking about childhood memories, I would think a cartoon that kind of straddles both gentle horror and comedy. I think with Scooby-Doo would be one that kind of has that. You know, I mean, it never was really scary, but it had monsters, it had witches and werewolves and
zombies and
yeah. I love the one where it's the robot at the carnival.
Oh yeah.
I love that one. And I love the one where that's the creepy glowing skull in the spacesuit at the old airport,
Yeah.
you know, with the spaceship landing, flying
That's
by,
great.
you know. Yeah, and
I like the one with the witch and the zombie, and I love so many of them. I mean, those first two seasons of that original show are just fantastic.
mhm. Yeah, I liked it less so when they started having the crossover, the hour-long shows with like Batman and the Harlem Globetrotters and Phyllis Diller, you know. I mean, other than
when they
having
had
a boner,
Scrappy-Doo.
other than having a boner, raging boner at Phyllis Diller. You know?
then they had Scrappy-Doo, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we
Yeah,
totally.
no, yeah, and I like the two movies. I think the movies did a really good job of can kind of conveying that sense of the cartoon and the characters and.
I was what I was saying before it blacked out. I mean, it literally blacked out on my screen and stuff. I was saying, you know, when they added Scrappy Doo, I hated that little son of a bitch. That ruined that show. He was so annoying, and Uncle Scooby. I was like, oh, let me at him. It's like, shut up. Too much talky, too much chattiness with him, and it took so much away from the show, you know. And I really started. I was like, can we get back to what it, you know, originally was, and just the gang and not him? Take Scrappy out of the equation.
Yeah, fuck you, Scrappy.
Yeah. Oh, hate it. You know, that show is probably, and all the other shows in the live action, is probably more popular today than it ever has been. There is like, you can't get into a regular store and find any toys for kids. Like my youngest grandson is 3, loves Scooby, everything about Scooby. And you can't find nothing. You can't find anything toy related now. It's just become even that much more popular than I think ever before. So
Wow. Well, yeah, and they keep on making these cartoons, like they're like movie length cartoons, which are still kind of entertaining. They're not quite as good as the half hour. I think there was a sweet spot when this came out.
Yeah.
In the 22-minute format or however long the episodes were, you come in, you tell a story, you have, you know, the musical interlude and the misdirection chasing scene, boom, problem solved. Meddling kids. The cartoons sometimes just drag out a little bit for me. I've watched a lot of them because it's Scooby-Doo, you know, and it's a cartoon. Right. I mean, I could spend all day. I think we've even talked about having a stink bowl where we just watch like Saturday morning, you know, we just watch cartoons and stuff all day, you know.
Absolutely. You know, I think the favorite one of mine is Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
Yeah, that's
fantastic. Yeah, I like that one.
I mean, there are some really good ones out there. I saw, I don't know, somewhere out in the world, there's a thing called a torrent, although I don't know what that is, that had all, like, every Scooby-Doo, like, ever, all the cartoons, all the movies, you know.
Yeah.
But only a crazy person would go looking for torrents. Another cartoon I think that also has, it was more, it had horrific stuff and sci-fi. A cartoon I think is great is Johnny Quest. I don't know if you ever watched that or not. Yeah, had a lot more of adventure and science fiction, but there was some horror stuff. There was like a mummy episode, you know, monsters and things like that. Yeah, Johnny Quest is such a really good cartoon. You know, I came across that kind of late in life because it was on a little before me. You know, but I found it. It was like in my, God, it might have been like in my 30s or something, 40s even. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just so good. You know, such a good cartoon. Oh, let's see. Since we're talking about childhood, I think, yeah, we've talked about the Munsters, the Addams Family. The Munsters were more straight horror. The Addams Family was more like a deranged. I mean, there weren't monsters as such. Like Cousin It might be close to something like that.
Well, things.
Yeah, Thing. Yeah, so there were these kind of macabre kind of moments. But those were all good, as a kid. And so I love that stuff. It just kind of reminds you of still being a kid.
Yeah.
So
at least the good portions of being a kid.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a warming thing. It's the same way like we started off Abbott and Costello, meet Frankenstein, and say the same things with these cartoons and shows. It's a warming feeling of nostalgia that's like it truly brings you back.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. So let's get into the more straightforward horror movies that have some comedy in them. I think like one of the movies that I would say is more of a horror movie with some comic elements. Before we move into this true comedy horror, and then we'll go to like comedy with horror in it. I think Dawn of the Dead is a movie that has a little bit of comedy in very few spots. It's pretty much a serious movie, except when you get to the mall. And then there's the scenes where they're looking at the zombies kind of moving around aimlessly with that music. Ba-dum bum bum, ba-dum bum bum, ba-dum bum ba-dum bum bum. And there's like that, obese zombie that kind of like falls over into the fountain, and they're just like falling over themselves, just being mindless idiots. I think that's a good example of a horror movie with some comedy.
That's a good choice. Yeah. Yeah, and I think because I remember they start basically just shopping and living like, obviously it's their new home, the mall, and they're still aimlessly walking outside the stores. And so there is that light comedy to it as well. And like you said, the music added to that is just hilarious.
Yeah. I think another example of like horror with comedy, and some of it's unintentional, I think. We have to look at the movies of Herschel Gordon Lewis. Blood Feast, Wizard of Gore, 2000 Maniacs, all the I know that's where you get the Montag mass revolution. I mean, I can't remember the number of times we have watched that movie and just cracked up our asses off, just like laughing hysterically at
I'm laughing right now.
the comic. The scenes of the close-up when Montag's like digging and like pulling out these guts and like it's just, there's those moments where it's just like,
or Blood Feast, an Egyptian feast,
right. Fuad Ramsey's, an Egyptian caterer, I'm having a party, right. I think some of it's unintentional.
I do.
It's
very exploitative, obviously.
Yeah.
And had definitely that 60s kind of, swing to it, charm and all those things.
I mean, this is like drive-in schlock. You're sitting there making
and the gore was so over the top. It was just hysterical.
Yeah, that's what I love about them.
Yeah.
Let's see. Another movie that I think has a surprising movie that has humor, particularly because the first movie in the series franchise lacks really having any sense of humor. Bride of Frankenstein, I think.
There is.
Yeah, there are some moments of sweet, kind of gentle humor. It's not very much, but it's light touches. And also, I think the scene where he meets the hermit.
Yeah.
With the smoking and but there's also it's a lot of pathos. That scene is very heartfelt and a lot of emotion with this music and the meeting of like this blind hermit who has this friend who can't speak. This kind of this thing together. But also you see in the very beginning of the movie, the I forget the actress. She's like the cackling hen, who's just going on and on about.
Hysterical.
And she's kind of comic relief, as well as Pretorius. I think brings a little bit of levity in his performance. It's so over the top that it is kind of borders on a little bit of humor. That I think is what Bride of Frankenstein. I think is the superior film. I think it's the best of the entire franchise.
Yes.
Beautiful shot. James Whale.
Yeah. Another thing is when Frankenstein actually meets the bride and her reaction. It's kind of
right.
It's comical, but it's not obviously I don't think it was intended. It's supposed to bring, that was her response. But I thought it was comical. The first time I watched the film, I didn't pick up on those little subtle hints of comedy.
Right.
But
Same here.
second time I threw, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's actually kind of funny. I don't think it's
Mhm.
supposed to be like that, but it wasn't so over the top. It didn't take away from the message of the film, or what a masterwork that it is. So
Yeah. Other films that I think in that vibe that have horror with a little bit of comedy, like the Abominable Dr. Phibes, the series with
that's great.
with
Vincent Price.
Vincent Price. Thank you. I can see him. I'm like, oh my god, I can't remember the master's name. Yeah, because there's some humor in those movies. It's a lot of tongue in cheek kind of humor in that movie.
And there's some brutal death traps and death scenes that he leaves for his victims. It's like, wow, that was, for that time, that had to be pretty intense.
Yeah. But it's a lot of satire in that, so it's kind of downplayed, but it's still prevalent in that movie. Oh, and one thing I wanted to bring up too is when we were talking about Blood Feast, it's more of a comedy horror. In the 1980s, there was a movie called Blood Diner that was kind of an homage to Herschel Gordon Lewis, because these two brothers owned a diner and they were going to try to resurrect this goddess, I think Ishtar or something like that.
I actually did see that. Now you
Yeah, and there's a scene where they're like making out with these girls, and like slathering like batter all over them, and like then they kick the girl and they like dunk her head, just covered in all this batter, and they dunk her head in the fryer, and it comes out like a giant like hush puppy, and she's running around, with this big pot of it's like, okay, that's pretty
good. Because I remember chopping people up and putting them into ovens and all this. I mean, it was just crazy.
Yeah, they were getting pieces parts to resurrect this goddess. It's very much like Blood Feast.
Yes.
Kind of a remake of Blood Feast in that regard. So I thought, and I remember having a copy. I think I still have a copy on VHS.
Okay.
Because it's just so ridiculous,
It is. Yeah, I do recall seeing that now. And when you said that the chick with the hush puppy head now, that was hilarious.
Oh yeah. It makes it more enjoyable. If it took itself too seriously, it would not be nearly the fun movie that it is.
Right.
And I think that's what I like about these movies that straddle the horror and the comedy. They're most of the time they don't take themselves so seriously, and I mean that's where we live. I mean, neither of us really like take very much seriously. I mean, when our entertainment, we like being scared, but like, come on, man. At the end of the day, we're just us, and we just want to have fun.
Right.
And that's where I see like other movies that are horror, but horror-esque, but have some comedy. I think one of our favorites, Wes Craven's People Under the Stairs.
I was gonna gonna get you. Good girls go to heaven. Bad girls burn in hell.
Mommy, I'm feeling one of my special headaches coming on. Yeah, it makes me want to wear a gimp suit, and run around the house. Gonna get you. And I remember watching it with you. We were we were watching the,
we saw that at the theater.
I think I came out to the theater to see you in Sandusky.
And we were rolling.
Yeah, everyone else was screaming, and we're like the only ones dying laughing.
Yeah,
I'm like, what are you guys? What are you guys screaming?
What are they
at?
scared
It's
about?
hysterical. I mean, but there are some generally horror elements in it for sure.
Sure.
But there's a lot more comedy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so subtly done. It's through the performances. It's the dialogue that's funny.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just again that sense of ridiculousness. Like Wes Craven really kind of gone out of his way to be kind of crazy in this aspect. And he's done that with some of his other movies as well, which is kind of what I like. Like Scream, I didn't put Scream on the list because there's not really comedy in it. But it's a fun horror film,
right? In
that regard,
I wonder if Tarantino got influenced the gimp suit for Pulp Fiction.
Maybe that would make perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
Bring out the gimp. Another one I think that it straddles that horror with a little bit of comedy in unexpected places. House, the 1980s classic
Yes,
House.
love that.
Yeah, the writer is there trying to write this novel, and he's, the house, these ghosts attack him, and he has to dismember that one body and trying to bury it, in his
Oh,
backyard, and then the dog doesn't the dog like pick it up or
yeah,
run away with an
get the
arm or
hand.
something? The hand?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
yeah, because he took over that home from his dead aunt, I believe, who killed
Yeah.
herself. And here it's totally haunted and got a lot of problems with it. So it's just so well done. And you got what's his name from Cheers?
Norm.
Yeah, Norm. I
Yeah.
forget the
And
actor's
the Greatest
name.
American Hero.
George Wendt.
Right?
George Wendt and
Right.
William Katt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a great cast. It was,
And
it was just
Bull
so
from Night
unique.
Court.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Richard Mulligan. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Is
such
it
a
Mull?
great
Richard
cast.
Mull?
Yeah, I think so. I remember seeing him. I saw that at the theaters, I believe, with my sister and my brother-in-law when it first came out all that time ago. It was such a blast, and I actually have it on DVD, and it has a sequel, which I don't think is
House 2
as
is not
well.
nearly as good.
No.
Yeah, but the first one's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I watch it again. I don't think it's a movie that stands up, 30 some years after the fact. It's not nearly as
Hasn't
exciting as
aged
it
well.
was. It hasn't aged
Yeah.
well, but it was still nice to kind of revisit it, but it's one of those like, okay, I think I'm good. I probably won't need to see it again,
Right.
But another movie that's a lot of horror with some really good humor. I think and I think also came out in 1984. American Werewolf in London, I think, has a lot of genuine horror. I mean, this is a really scary werewolf movie. And
the transformation is
the
one of
transformation
the
scene, the nightmares that he has with the Nazi vampire, werewolves coming in, like slitting his family's throat, horrific stuff. And then juxtaposed with these elements of comedy, like when he wakes up after the first transformation, like in the zoo, and he's like, "Oh fuck, I'm naked," and he's like trying to get home. When his friend shows up and he's dead, "Hey, we need to talk. I'm the living dead here. I can't. You gotta kill yourself, buddy. Jack, I'm looking like a human meatloaf here." And as he progressively gets more deteriorated, there's that horror element of it, but there's also very funny because, when they choose to meet, like in the porn place, at Piccadilly Circus, they're watching that awful porn movie, but then there's like everybody he's killed, like the couple, the blonde who's still really perky and chirpy, like hi, from the winos, who were there, and everyone's like, "You gotta kill yourself, fucker! You killed me!" That's a lot. There's a lot of humor in that. I really, that
it was
still
great.
stands out.
It was great that it was, like you said, juxtaposed with everything else going on, but it also that mental deterioration as the film goes on until that triumphant, transformation.
Yeah.
Which is one of the best ever in history.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. There's a lot of humor in there with that. It was probably John Landis's shining moment, I think.
Yeah, definitely. He's done quite a bunch.
Well, and he did the Thriller video, obviously, Michael Jackson, which was fantastic. All the makeup and stuff on that. So.
Oh yeah, certainly. Let's see. Another film that's kind of got a lot of horror with some comedy. One of my favorite movies is Ravenous. I think there are some, and it's through the dialogue, especially when we have Calhoun's character, just wonderfully played to the teeth, and saying, they're eating these bowls of people, the cannibals, and he's like, "Eat to live, don't live to eat." Ben Franklin. These little kind of moments that are quite funny, in the middle of this like really black comedy. There's a lot of horror going on with these little tiny pops of comedy, and that's why I think it's what some people just don't like it, because they don't know how to go back and forth between something that's funny and something that's horrific. I don't know.
Right. Well, and then there's that one scene where they're discussing. I forget the one soldier who's the drunk, and they had just killed him and said, "I'm afraid what's his name's shine for the bottle didn't leave him his flesh too much in the pink," or something like that. It's just hilarious.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, you're right. It's that dark humor, and I don't think people can appreciate it. That's a very underappreciated film. Period. What a fantastic cast, fantastic script, everything, story. So we can both agree on that. It's just so overlooked, and the music. Let's not forget.
Yeah, the
music
score is amazing.
Mhm.
Michael Nyman and Albarn. I forget the other guy's name. James Albarn, I think. I
think
love
so.
that soundtrack. One of my
Yeah.
favorites. Yeah, it's on my writing list. Like when I
It's
want to
so
write a
unique.
concept.
It's creepy, but it's also it's so original that
Yeah.
you never heard anything quite like it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Another movie that has horror with comedy and also a really great soundtrack by another very interesting band. Another 80s classic, Fright Night.
Oh yes.
Yeah. I mean, the cast is great. I mean, we've got, you know, from
Roddy McDowell.
Cornelius. Yeah, Cornelius from Planet of the Apes. I'm remembering the characters, not the name.
Right.
And then we have this kind of great vampire story with elements of like the he's the horror host, mixture with this kind of elements of something you might have seen from like Salem's Lot, some genuine vampire horror with some kind of really good comic spectacle.
Oh yeah. Yeah, fantastic cast. It's definitely right up there. It has to be in maybe one of my top 5 films of all time. I just love it. Now the remake, but we won't.
See, I don't see these remakes. I generally don't.
I know. I gotta stop doing that. I gotta tell myself,
You gotta
don't
stop.
You're
You gotta stop collecting all that shit too.
stop
Stop it. Stop
Good.
collecting.
Yeah,
Save it up for something good. Yes, good.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't collect that movie. That was but yeah, it was just not. They changed the story around, of course. They tried to make it too serious, and again, that's when it took a dump right from the get-go.
It's supposed to be kind of fun and a little bit
light,
light.
all these elements coming in.
Yeah. Let's see, another one that kind of brings in elements of horror film with some comedy. I would say one of our favorites. We've paused certain scenes of this several times. It's got one of the best lines you ever heard in a movie. "You're a load I should have swallowed." The granny.
The granny. Oh yeah, we definitely stopped one part for sure.
We stopped at a couple appropriate sequences.
Yes. Yeah, you're a load your mother should have swallowed. This was great. Oh
yeah, that line I still love saying. Like that is like my favorite movie line, right next to like take your stinking paws up, you damn dirty ape. Is "You are a load I should have swallowed."
I actually use that line. We're bullshit factory talk. Ex supervisors and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to get all smart ass. I say, "Oh yeah," I yell out real loud. "Yeah, you're a load your mama should have swallowed." Something like that. He's like, "Oh my God." I'm like, "Yes, yeah, suck it." So yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Great. I mean, you remember those. It's like you said, even from Planet of the Apes lines. You remember those one-liners or different things that just, you can't help it. It's going to be imprinted in you forever.
Yeah, it's just going to stick with you. Along those lines, and you had mentioned one of our absolute favorite movies of all time, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yes,
is a brilliant movie in that it straddles that horror and comedy seamlessly. In the same scene, you're going to get violent horror and really sharp, stinging, comical lines. I remember the first time I saw it is at a drive-in, and the scene where Choptop is just beating the shit out of LG, but every time he's swinging the hammer down, he's like bringing up like "incoming mail," boom, Ho Chi Minh, boom, and I'm thinking, my God, it was just so macabre, and like I'm thinking, what the fuck is going to happen here? And then when Leatherface comes in with the chainsaw to, when he makes friends with Stretch, I thought for sure, because you don't know who's going to live, who's going to die. I'm thinking, oh no, he's going to saw right in half. He's going to like get the hoo-ha and just go right up.
Right.
I'm like, no, don't do that. But that movie,
I think you bring up an interesting point. I thought about this a little bit now. It is that the pacing and that seamless blend of horror and comedy all in the same scene, it gives the film a sense of mania. It's manic.
Mhm.
You actually feel that. You feel that physically as you're watching that. Because I know the first few times I watched it, I just had this kind of franticness or this manic feeling because of the pacing, because how relentless, because of the comedy and horror in one scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's what makes it stand out. That none of the other films have done that
No.
successfully. Very, there aren't a lot of films that do this. They sometimes they try, they just fail. But yeah, this one, they're just magic. Just the screenplay by Kit Carson is just fantastic.
Don't
I think
ever watch the reimagining on the Netflix of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
no, I've already heard enough about it. Like, no, I'm not gonna watch it.
I listened. I watched our buddy Justin. His review.
Yeah.
I read it and I'm like, oh, I gotta see it for myself. Though, see how bad. And yes, it was absolutely everything he said. So never to be seen again. But I think I have.
Anyway, man, you deserve it, man. You knew it was going to be a pile of shit, and you stepped in it anyway.
No, I think that I know I can't help.
There's a movie called The Wind that's supposed to be really good on Netflix.
I've seen that.
Is it good?
It's on IFC.
Okay, I'll check it out.
It's a slow burn.
I like The Witch. I enjoyed that.
Oh, The Witch was
Which was fantastic.
Yeah, The Wind was it definitely has a sense of creepiness, isolation, forebodingness.
I like it. Have you seen Midnight Mass yet?
Yes, love it.
Holy
I
fuck.
could watch
I'm trying to get that guy. I'm
anytime.
trying to get the priest on our show.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. I can't reach out. I can't contact him. I can't find no contact information for him. Like, dude. So, hey, priest, we want to talk to you, buddy. Come on. I think there's a few more that we can talk about that were mostly horror that had an interjection of humor. And that kind of made them memorable. First, I'm just going to Santa's Sleigh. It's not a good movie.
No.
There's a couple scenes that were funny. It's a straightforward movie about a killer Santa Claus coming back to demonic Santa Claus, if you will.
Bill Goldberg.
Yeah, Goldberg. But the scene where he's like chasing down the old lady who's driving, get off the road, bitch, or whatever. That's good. That's fine. I want to see Santa Claus yelling at people like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really funny. And then you have movies like I think another one that has mostly horror with some comedy. Let's see here. Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, I think starts to transition, because Evil Dead, I think, was one of the just straightforward horror, one of the best horror films ever made.
Yes.
And now they're bringing a little bit of a comedy in part 2, which is like a remake and a sequel.
Army of Darkness, they carried it even further.
Army of Darkness is more of a comedy with horror. I think it's on that. That's where the transition jumps between horror with comedy to a comedy with horror, which I think is slightly different. But it's all in the same continuum, the spectrum. That's why I had them both in there. Because there's a little bit of humor in Evil Dead 2. Just some kind of puns and things like that, silliness. Like where the demonic book, Farewell to Arms, just goofy stuff like that. But then by Evil Dead 3, you're doing the puns like Hail to the King, baby. It's a lot more comical in that regard. And then making the switch, then we're those kinds of movies. Before we make that switch, I want to bring up the TV show Millennium, which I love. I'd love to get and talk with the master. I've reached out to him, but I haven't heard back yet. That's okay. I don't want to push, but I'd like to have him come on and talk with us. So we'll see.
So many films too.
Yeah, yeah. But season 3 of Millennial, seasons 1 and 2 are very dark, straightforward. A lot of horror, a lot of very intense shows. It was too intense for its time. It was way ahead of its time. Season 3, I did not like as nearly as much because they started intentionally bringing in humor. Because who was it? The guy who did X-Files, the same guy who produced the show, Chris Carter.
Yes.
Was listening to all the people whining and bitching about how dark the show was. I'm like, yeah, of course it's dark. It's a fucking dark show. It was the only one, the first kind of show of its kind on TV. And then they started like trying to do humor, more like an X-Files episode, which it worked on X-Files because it wasn't constant. And when those happened, like when the episode about the guy playing D&D, it's like I didn't learn to be heroic without, or I didn't play D&D all those years and didn't learn how to be heroic or something. I mean, that was a great episode.
Sure.
But there was the episode where they're at a diner or a restaurant or something like that, and all these demons are gathered there talking. They look like humans, but they're really demons, and Frank can see them.
Yeah, they're just having coffee and all this stuff.
Yeah, and it for me it kind of robbed what I thought was great about the show. Chris Carter's trying to bend toward people. It's too dark, and it just it just ruined that third season for me in a way, because it just wasn't as good.
Right. And that was a very, I would have liked to seen if they got away from that and continued on with the show, because that was a very underrated show. And like you said, very much ahead of its time. There was nothing else on television.
No, nothing like that. And I mean, think of all the shows that have become since that have been about profilers. Movies like Silence of the Lambs, would not have been here, I don't think, without shows like that. Although, yeah, it sounds about right. Millennium came on was that the 90s? Or maybe Silence of the Lambs was earlier.
Maybe it was earlier. But but I think it influenced so much more. And you do hear a lot of fans out there of the show that were very disappointed, not only with that season, but they wish that would have continued, that show, because it was
a good
one
show.
of the best.
Yeah, I saw Lance Henriksen on Facebook. He was talking about how it might, someone's considering bringing it back out or something. I'm like, go ahead. Great. I mean, I have it, but I'd love to have it back on TV again. That'd be awesome.
Dude, that'd be great.
So, Mr. Henriksen, if you're out there, we'd love to talk with you. Let's see. A couple other movies I think have a lot of horror with a little bit of comedy in them to make them kind of stand out. One is Child's Play. I think has just a little bit of humor because of the nature of who the killer is inside Chucky. The guy possessing the doll, the spirit of this killer, is kind of funny. He's funny. And although it's played for straight horror, there are moments, especially like the one scene I remember where they're like on the elevator with the old lady, and Chucky's just sitting there in the corner, and the old lady's like, "What an ugly doll," and he says something like, "Fuck you, bitch," or something like that. Or, "Fuck you." I'm like,
I like when he did that the car scene where he's in the car with the detective or whatever, and he's like in the back seat, and he like puts on a or hits something, and you can see it slow motion going. Fantastic.
Yeah,
it's a fun movie.
It is. It's a fun movie, and the horror is not throughout the entire film because it's played straight for the most part. But as the sequels come, they get sillier and sillier, kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street. The first two are pretty straightforward horror films.
Yeah.
But then they get sillier and sillier as they go. So that film, and there's another one I think it kind of when we're starting to cross over into the comedy with some horror movies, like or horror with comedy, like Cabin in the Woods, I think is a great movie that straddles both horror and comedy. It's pretty straightforward, but there's this undercurrent of comedy, kind of odd comic timing and stuff kind of woven throughout the entire movie, because you know that something's being set up. These people are being set up, so there's something going on. But there's where the comedy happens. It's not in the stuff that happens out in the cabin. It's all the stuff that's going on as they manipulate and they're taking bets and all these things are going on. But even that's kind of masking the super seriousness of it. Like, fuck, we gotta feed these fucking gods or else we're all gonna die.
We're all fucked, yeah.
Yeah. And so there's just like layers of horror and comedy that I think make it a really effective and fun movie for anyone who doesn't really like horror per se. They will probably like Cabin in the Woods because it's a fun movie. It's really good.
You know, what I wish I could have, the only disappointment in that film, I wish I would have seen more of the creatures, you know, more time with them, you know. There were so many cool creatures in that whole story. I was just like, man, and they're just, it's like a blip. They're tearing everybody apart and then it's over, that kind of thing. I wish just to see more on them because, man, there was some fantastic looking creatures and makeup in that movie.
Oh yeah, and the CG was great. Yeah, practical effects. Yeah, a lot of genuine horror. I mean, those last like 15 minutes, it's just like a free for all. I mean, it's just everywhere. You know, it's what a big finale should be. You know, it's just kind of ridiculous and crazy.
Here's your money shot. Yeah,
exactly right. Oh my God, the merman is terrifying. You know, right? Yeah, exactly. You have that. Another movie that I think that tends to have a lighter side. It straddles horror and comedy really, really nicely. Return of the Living Dead.
Oh yes.
Such a good movie, and I remember seeing this too. Might have been a drive-in as well. But I love the fact that we have these really kind of creepy zombies. They're fast. They can talk. That's what's part of the comic element, especially when they're on the phone going, "Send more paramedics," you know, because they've already killed and eaten the ones that were there. You know, and then the scenes the scenes inside like the processing plant where they have all these animals and human figures, cadavers and stuff. When they get the inhale the gas and you see them deteriorating, you're all screaming about how much it hurts and all. You know, there's a lot of intensity to that movie as well.
Oh yeah.
You know, but combine that with some great soundtrack and some heavy metal, you know, and naked girls in the graveyard. I mean, you got a great movie.
Oh yeah. And the great effects, great practical effects.
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic looking. Zombie was scary as shit when I first saw it. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally. So we're transitioning to comedy with horror. Then I think we got to bring in a movie like Eight-Legged Freaks. I think is a really fun pick. Giant bug movie, arachnid movie. Like you would see something from the 1950s. But there's this undercurrent of humor interjected throughout. Sometimes the spiders, you can hear them talking. And just a kind of there's a general lightness to it. Like you get like an arachnophobia in a way, although that's more of a comedy without much horror. But of all the spider movies, because I know you're not really a spider fan there, Choptop.
Good one's a dead one. Yep.
Yeah. Like Kingdom of the Spiders is, creepy. Exactly.
But I think what's cool about the Eight-Legged Freaks, though, it was definitely a straight homage to the 1950 giant bug movies. It was really cool to see that, kind of bringing that back, hey, we're paying our tribute to the giant bug kind of creature features of that time. So that was cool.
Yeah.
It had a good cast too. That was a good cast.
Yeah, really good cast. It was fun. I think if we're talking about those kinds of movies that have the really kind of comedy and horror blend really kind of seamlessly, more comedy than horror, I would say Beetlejuice would be a fantastic example.
Yes.
Extreme. It's a brilliant cast and script. The visuals of it, because it's just one of those when you get a director, a producer, and the visuals all come together. I mean, he was great in Mars Attacks, in Nightmare Before Christmas. Tim Burton's vision kind of really comes to life here and it's macabre, it's funny, it's very smart.
He's definitely, speaking about Burton, definitely one of the more stylistic directors that you see out there. I mean, you can tell just by starting to see how the movie flows at the beginning, that's a Burton film. Just the look. There's always a dark to it.
Yeah.
But there's always there's a sense of, like you said, that sprinkle in some humor here and there.
Mhm.
But you can tell that it's a Burton film right from the get-go.
Yeah, I agree. Wonderful film.
Yeah.
And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring back some of one of the really great director. You people might know him for the Frighteners. Peter Jackson did the Frighteners, which is a comedy horror. Lord of the Rings, King Kong. But his first movie is called Bad Taste, and that is a true comedy with horror elements, science fiction elements. It's about these aliens who invade a township and they feast on human flesh. And it's got some of the best, grossest practical effects that you will ever see in a horror film or comedy.
Agreed.
It is just outright gross at times. And the scene where like, oh, bring in Robert, the gruel is ready. And then Robert just like starts vomiting into this bucket, fills it with like, looks like Watergate salad. It's all green with like marshmallows and chunks like nuts. And then it's like steam's coming up and like he's smelling it. Oh, it's a good batch. And he starts drinking it. And like, you seem like gross. And he's like, oh, aren't I lucky? I got a chunky bit. It's like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very it can be, there's some scenes that are stomach churning, that's for sure.
Yeah. Bad Taste is just really, really great in that. It's just so over the top.
Let's not forget the classic, one of our favorites, another one after that was Dead Alive.
Yeah, Brain Dead or Dead Alive.
Yeah.
Right, which was voted, I think, the goriest movie of all time. It takes a little bit longer to get involved with. The story's a little more straightforward at first, but once it's like a snowball. It's kind of builds its own momentum. The last half hour is just insane. With some really great.
It's worth alone, kids, to watch just for the lawnmower scene. Just, I'm gonna tell you.
Yeah, you have to. And then the priest, I kick ass for the Lord. Yes, that's fantastic.
Yeah, Kung Fu Priest, that was great.
Yeah, that was awesome. And then just like the gross scenes, like when Lionel's mother's like friends are over, his uncle maybe.
Yeah.
No pudding. And the mother's all deteriorating, and she like pushes on a sword, like squirts into the guy's pudding, and he like eats it. I'm like, oh god, because it just shoots out like pus. It's just like visceral, disgusting kind of body horror. Yeah.
Like, oh god.
Yeah, just really, just really
brilliant practical effects as well for a film.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, especially with the budget that he was working with, so much fun. And then I think that could bring us into movies like that are definitely on the comedy side with some horror elements like Doghouse, which we both really love. I think it's the British horror film comedy with horror. A bunch of guys get together to go for a bachelor weekend because one of them's getting married, and they go to this little town where all the women have contracted like I don't know, something that makes them go crazy, like a virus, and they just want to go kill all the men. Yes, and then so it's definitely a lot of humor in the horror in that regard, and again, more practical effects that are really funny. It's quite funny. Straddles that horror comedy pretty well, but not as funny or comic as another great British horror comedy. Shaun of the Dead, which I think is one of the best examples of that comedy within a horror. It's brilliantly acted. It's very kind of it's great humor in the midst of this really horrifying situation. Like the horror doesn't impact at first. Sean's just kind of going about his day and doesn't realize that the zombie apocalypse is waiting for him outside. And then when it hits him, it's just like, oh, everything kind of hits. It's hysterical.
And especially when they keep that one locked in the shed or whatever. It might have been his dad or the other dude's there or something. Yeah, I forget. It's been a while since I saw it, but that's comical.
Oh yeah, I think the zombie keeps on getting caught, like there's a hook or something.
Yeah,
cooking on his clothes and they can't get out. In that vein, then I think we can bring up movies like Ghostbusters, which we tend to think of as a comedy. It is, but there are some spooky horror elements that like when we first see the floating ghost in the library,
Yeah.
when she changes from being like very kind of sweet and serene to this very much terrifying kind of
Demonic.
ghost. Yeah, like what you would see at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a frightening change. So yeah, and you have a couple elements like that, especially when all the ghosts get when they shut down the Ghostbusters and all the ghosts get freed and they're just going around doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
More humor than horror, but definitely elements of both. And it's a really well done, having a comedy with some horror in it.
Yeah.
I like that.
And then in reverse, I'm going to bring up one we need to discuss, and it's a little bit probably more horror and some comedy in it, but is Slither.
Yeah, it's on my
What
list.
a fantastic movie. I mean, we first saw that, I think, we're like, oh, I think it was a stink bone, Slither, and like, wow. I mean, it had every element you had science fiction horror, sci-fi horror. You had, these slugs that turn people into zombie-esque kind of creatures. It was just everything you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And what a cast in that. Nathan Fillion, of course, from Firefly, Serenity, great actor. He's funny anyways, a lot of his other shows and stuff. And man, was that mayor in that movie was hysterical. Yeah,
and then we also got.
Will you move your fucking vehicle? When he's right that little kid and that lady, he's like, "Hi, Mayor." He's like, "Man." Yeah.
We got the two twins who are showing up at the car. We're itchy, and then we have the main alien. I forget. Well, what's his name? He was in.
Oh gosh, Walking Dead. He was.
Walking Dead. Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. He was in Guardians of the Galaxy, which James Gumb. Not James Gumb. Oh, did you direct Guardians of the Galaxy? James Gunn was the guy who did Slither, and he also did Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think that's why he brought him in. I forget the actor's name.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I know. They all know who he is.
Yeah,
everybody.
Yeah.
But you, as the actor, sir, if you're watching out there, please respond to Heavy Metal.
Yeah, even though we can't remember your name, we'd like to come on. Yeah, come on our show. Yeah, we'll remember by then.
Yeah, we'll have it right for the show. But
we're freewheeling. I don't have these. I can't think. I'm naked.
Make sure you hit the subscribe button on our show, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So in that regard, we have though. That's a great. Slither is a fantastic movie.
Oh.
And it's so fun. Good practical effects. A lot of good CG. Again, we got this kind of zombie. We got this kind of mutant creature from space. We got this evolving, growing, monstrous kind of condition. I mean, the woman in the barn, she's just, it
hurts, bitch.
Right. Yeah, and then it's just like so wrong in so many ways.
Her flesh is ripping, and then all those slugs come out of her. It's like, oh my god!
Pop goes the weasel,
like a big water balloon. Yeah.
Another one, I think it probably belongs on the other side of the tracks here, but what movie we liked was Grabbers, that had that kind of elements of horror and comedy. The creature with all the tentacles, and then the kind of rounding all the citizens up. They had to stay in the pub, because
you stay drunk.
Yeah, stay drunk because the monsters didn't like alcohol. That's a really fun one too, as well as spoiler alert: the monster doesn't like alcohol. That's a really fun one as well. That's one we both have enjoyed.
Absolutely.
And, I thought that was you. I thought you were laying one down. I'm like, wow, good for you, man.
No, it's assholes outside,
Yeah.
Got to show off by,
Yeah, exactly.
Loud attention or
compensating.
Something like
they're compensating.
Yeah, they're compensating. I don't have to do that, so I'm fine.
Exactly.
They don't call me the sausage for nothing.
They don't call me the Vienna sausage for nothing. So another one I think that has that really great science fiction and horror and comedy all blended together, Tremors. We'd mentioned before.
Yeah, we did a whole show, a review with Blood.
Yeah, we did. We did a review of Tremors. Great movie, so much fun, really entertaining.
What a cast.
And most of those sequels have been pretty good. You know, like the first like 3 or 4 sequels. I wasn't crazy about A Cold Day in Hell, but maybe I just need to see it again. And I didn't see anything in the series, so I don't know if any of that was any good.
And the duo of we talked about before, Michael Gross and God, I can't remember her name. Country singer.
Reba McEntire.
Reba McEntire. Fantastic.
They were great together.
They really worked together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderfully.
Yeah. I always like Reba McEntire. I think she's pretty cute. You know?
Yeah.
Miss McEntire. You know, if you're not busy, come on the show. Let's talk. Another one that we're doing more comedy than horror. I think movies like Snakes on a Plane has a nice kind of blend of comical elements with some horror.
I didn't even think of that one. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a great movie. It's entertaining. It's an entertaining movie. Yeah, it is that. And one my grandma really liked. She liked that. She liked a lot of these movies. We watched quite a bit of these movies. She liked.
Great.
Couldn't find anything scary enough for her. You know, she loved The Evil Dead. Man, I'm trying to like, oh, this is scary. And she's like, oh, that was great. I'm like, okay,
thank you, Mark. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, Snakes on a Plane has some comedy, some horror. Then some interesting ones. I think one that we both really like. It involves a killer snowman. Jack Frost is a great movie that is a comedy horror.
The shower scene is worth alone for that. Yeah.
Yes, the premise is very much like Child's Play, in that a serial killer or murderer's soul is transferred through a car crash and through some chemicals or something into a body or a blanket of snow into this body of a snowman, and then proceeds to go around like, you know, killing people with a carrot and stuff like that. And I think my favorite scene is when he gets hit by a car and he's like flying through the air and he's like, I can see my house from down here, you know. And then when he lands, he's all like disconjunkled. He's like, look, Mom, I'm Picasso. You know, like, okay, okay, that's right. That's brilliant right there. That is some good stuff.
Right. Another one I got to bring up list that, you know, sort of make it in that same kind of comedy horror vein of that movie, Ice Cream Man.
Oh, right. Yeah, we could also add The Dentist.
Yeah.
Right.
Dr. Giggles.
Or Dr. Giggles.
Yeah.
Dr. Giggles is funny. I mean, the first time I watched it, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with this man? That is a pile of shit. But it's actually kind of funny.
It is. It is.
I watched it again. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. This is shitty, but it's funny.
Ice Cream
Man
tells you everything. Just this demented Ice Cream Man who basically kills people and uses them for toppings on ice creams. Or they show, I think the cover of VHS had like a head on his cone.
It's a head on a cone.
Pulling it like this.
You know. That's what I want. Can I have it chocolate dipped?
I mean, what's amazing is like that's Ron Howard's brother, Clint. You know,
yeah, Clint Howard's.
Boy, they both went in different directions, didn't they?
Well, I mean, Clint's been acting.
A long time.
A long time. You know, he's been very prolific. He just never got the success that his brother did. But you know, Ron still casts him in movies, like he was in Apollo 13 and things like that. And he's you know, still a working actor. He still, you know, still does all kinds of stuff. I think he's still a working actor.
So of course, he was in the Austin Powers original, The Private. Sir, it looks like a Frisch's Big Boy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he's in all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Other fun movies that bring in this kind of comedy with some horror. I think Killer Clowns from Outer Space is a really good example of this kind of ridiculous. Aliens come down, they look like clowns, really frightening clowns, and their spaceship is a circus tent. You know, all this clown imagery is in there, and you know, I'm not a clown fan.
No.
And these clowns are definitely creepy. But I like some of the stuff that they do. Like they have popcorn guns that they shoot out at you. They have they encase you in cotton candy, you know, because they basically gathering humans to eat them, you know, and transport them in these cotton candy cocoons, you know, which is hysterical. So all these kind of puns and plays on like clown stuff, you know, with the nose, I think the squirting flour, you know, all these kinds of things that happen that, if you're, it's a really wildly entertaining movie. Very, very kind of silly. Very
Oh, yeah.
1980s. You want to have
I'm
a
gonna bring up-
VHS.
I'm
player
gonna bring
for
up
that.
another a film. Just putting out there that last year I believe it came out, and I think I rented it off. I don't know if it's Amazon or whatever. But Werewolves Within,
Oh.
fantastic horror comedy. Basically, it's about this this African American park ranger gets reassigned to this small town, and this town's basically on edge if they're going to sell out for this. I don't know, if it's a gas company, oil company, whatever. And all of a sudden, these murders start happening. And here they find out it's a werewolf, of course, but it's with a twist. But there is so many hilarious lines in it, and it's really some dark humor, excellently acted, and it's so much fun. So I highly recommend anybody hasn't seen it, go ahead and see that
Cool.
movie, Werewolves Within.
I'll check it out. I'll add it to the list. That
Yeah.
sounds great.
It is a blast.
Excellent. I've got a couple more on my list here that I think are funny. A couple foreign horror films I think straddle this comedy horror. There's a movie called Kung Fu from Beyond the Grave. It's like a martial arts horror comedy that has zombies and martial arts zombies, which is kind of fun. And there's one called Mr. Vampire, I think, which has actually a couple sequels. Mr. Vampire is a Chinese horror film,
Okay.
which deals with the Chinese vampires, which are different than Eastern European vampires, in that they're more of like a soul that hasn't been prayed for properly. Usually when people die, the priest has to do these incantations and prayers, and they put a prayer cloth on their head, like a little tiny strip of paper with some writing on it. And if the kind of strip blows off, then the corpse becomes animated. And it has this negative chi,
I
negative
might have
energy.
saw that.
And then the earth kind of tries to reject them, but then they can't get off the ground, so they come back down, and they move by hopping. They're called Chinese hopping vampires. And it's kind of, Mr. Vampire is like a mix between Monty Python and the Three Stooges, as far as that kind of humor, with elements of like zombie fun, because the animated corpses are very much like zombies in that regard.
Huh.
But and the humor sometimes can be subtle, but it's also sometimes can be really slapsticky. So like one scene they were talking about, like, you have to use sticky rice against these kinds of vampires, and so they had accidentally spilled all their rice out, and all this rice was together. So there's some guys like sitting with a pair of chopsticks, like picking out one grain of rice at a time, like moving into the sticky rice pile. Little things like that are kind of.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, Mr. Vampire is great.
I'm going to bring up a couple.
Okay.
I think we're both fans of Dead Snow, and probably its far superior sequel, Dead Snow Red versus Dead. Just fantastic. Whole
Those are
take
great.
on the Nazi zombie trope, in horror. And I think it was, I believe it's Swedish films, if I'm not mistaken, or Norwegian, maybe Norwegian.
Could be.
And but they are just excellently well done. Just a hoot. What a blast. Anybody gets chance to check them out, please do, because they're worth the time. Either of them.
Yeah, those are tremendously fun. Great movies.
Yes.
A lot of fun. Another fun movie here that's in the comedy with some horror aspect. We're moving closer and closer to comedy, but I thought Mega Python versus Gatoroid had elements of a little bit of horror, a little bit of comedy, and a lot of Tiffany and Debbie Gibson.
Yes, we enjoyed that because we watched like the world premiere of it or whatever.
Yeah, I wish I had that copy. It was on VHS. I wish I'd kept it, because you can't find that version anymore.
No.
It has since been cut. There are some scenes, particularly when Tiffany's running to save people in the scene where they're on the bridge. Some of those scenes have been truncated unnecessarily.
What a shame.
Yes.
I think the best thing was the cake fight.
Cake fight. Yeah.
That was fantastic. Yeah. Cake and Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Tiffany and Debbie Gibson. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
More frosting, please. Yeah.
Yeah, just down to a few more things that I think are quite funny. Zombievers,
Oh yeah.
ridiculous horror comedy with, you know, the beaver, the animals turning into zombies. You know,
Yeah.
quite.
And if they get bit, the humans, I think there's a couple humans, I think they look like
Yeah.
beavers. They got the
They
teeth.
start taking on beaver characteristics from, you know, Beaveroid. That'll be the next Tiffany Debbie Gibson one. Beaveroid. That'd be awesome. I'd like to see that.
Yes.
Nice beaver. Ward, I think you're a little hard on the beaver last night. Not as hard I'm going to be tonight. Speaking of, I think then there's a franchise of films that the first one has unintentional humor in it. But as the franchise goes, they get sillier and sillier to almost ridiculous. The last one almost is kind of jumps the shark, literally. And we're talking Sharknado.
Sharknadoes.
Yes. Yeah. There's like, by the time you get to like number 4 and 5, they're really quite comical. They're bringing in all kinds of cameos, you know, quite silly. But the last one was just, it wasn't nearly as good because I think they knew we were trying too hard by that time.
Yeah, they knew that it was fading out. It was time to move on.
Yeah, and I love the premise, but now I liked when Sci-Fi Channel would show Sharknado days all day, you know,
like a marathon day.
Yeah, but those are still wildly entertaining, and they just get quite silly, you know, and that's what I like about it. It's here's a comedy movies with like some horrific premise to become sillier as they go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I've just got 2 more. That I mean, if you have more, great. But 2 more for me that I think are full comedy with horrific elements. But now we've kind of gone. I'm gonna bookend it with a movie that's kind of the opposite of where we began. I'm gonna go with Young Frankenstein, Mel Brooks. We have a comedy, but I remember seeing this as a kid. I was little. I mean, I was like 7 when we saw this in the theater. And again, because I'm 7 and I'm impressionable and I know there's a Frankenstein, there were still elements that I thought were scary and didn't quite understand, frankly, because I was 7. You know, 7-year-olds shouldn't be watching, you know, you know, like watching Blazing Saddles at age 7. You know, I was like, what?
I think my aunt took me to the theaters to see it. I really didn't understand the humor, but woo, you understand it was you got older. Right.
And there's the scene like I laughed at in the beginning where like he's testing the reflexes of that guy who he apparently shut them all down and he kicks him in the nuts. And you can see the guy like crossing his eyes. I got that, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But there's again, it's a comedy, but it's set within the Frankenstein world. It's a satire, kind of a parody, but it's still has some horror elements to it that are couched within comedy. You know, very much like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think Marty Feldman is Igor was hilarious in that movie too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's funny anyway. Marty Feldman was.
Yeah.
But as Igor, you know, obviously because he had those weird wild eyes. So
exactly. Just and so brilliantly acted. Mel Brooks was at the top of his game between Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles.
Yep.
I think Blazing Saddles is his finest work. Just hysterical. You know, when we really ignored, since we had this interview a couple of weeks ago, we totally forgot like the Toxic Avenger, which has again comedy with some horror in it. This horrific change of what happens and
Uncle Lloyd.
You know, Uncle Lloyd, right? But
and they're doing a full
Uncle Lloyd say his movies are not horror movies; they are satires or comedies with horror elements in them. So
now
that's
also, didn't you tell me Legendary or Warner is doing a total remake of that? Like a whole big budget production of Toxic Avenger? Redoing it?
Yeah, with Peter Dinklage, a whole like cast of like A-list actors, which is amazing. So
this is amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm like, I never would have figured that in a million years. And my last pick on my list.
I've seen also this week.
Go ahead, man.
Go ahead, bud. Well, I was just going to bring it. Anybody didn't. Obviously, if they're living under a rock, they didn't hear us. But I guess Rob Zombie's Monsters movie got a PG rating, which I'm like, Thank God, in a lot of ways. I'm just hoping that, Mr. Zombie, I love your music, but I hate your script writing. So I hope they have somebody else that wrote the script. But I hope they do it justice. I do.
Yeah,
And I'm glad to see the PG rating, and it, let's.
right. They're
Even
gonna make it
Zombie
more
said,
family friendly.
yeah, even Zombie
Um,
said this is not your typical film that I do, and it's not going to have this,
That's
this,
good.
this, and that. So that's cool. I just hope
Yeah.
it does real justice to the television show, because I'm a huge fan.
You are a fan.
Yep.
And I've seen just a couple production stills with the actors in their makeup.
Oh, and the house looks great.
The house looks great.
Yeah,
Not
Mockingbird
crazy
Lane.
about who they picked to play the
No,
makeup.
me
You know,
neither.
I mean, I get it. You got to put your wife in every movie you make, because she's gonna be like there with you, and if you don't, she's gonna be pissed.
Right.
But she just shouldn't be playing Lillian.
No.
Yvonne DiCarlo, so sexy,
Yes.
crazy hot. Just like in the Addams Family, Morticia, I thought was always
Oh yeah.
she's just always.
When she used to speak French, and oh, mi amor.
Anyone else have a boner? Oh, it was like watching Batgirl when I was little. I was 4 years old, like Batgirl. I'm like, why do I feel funny down here? Yes. Still have an affinity for purple glittery costumes. Good thing I'm so glad to be raised on television. My last pick is a sentimental one. It's comedy with a very, very mild humor or horror. Very mild. It's more like a haunted house with comedy. And it's The Ghost of Mr. Chicken with
God,
Don
I haven't
Knotts.
seen that since I was probably like 10 years old or something.
Yeah, it is so fun. It's sentimental because my grandma loved that movie, and I used to watch it with her a lot. It was one of the last movies we watched together before she passed. And so I just have always loved that movie. So if it's on, I'll always DVR it just to watch it a couple times, to have it on. Again, the humor is prevalent. It's very
Sure.
mild, and there
Yeah,
are
Don
horror
Knotts.
elements.
Like any of his films, yeah.
Yeah, horror elements. He goes to a haunted house, and things move, and a painting bleeds and has knives in it, and a bloody keyboard plays by its own. So it's got this kind of spook, quality to it that's kind of very gentle.
Right.
I thought it's a nice way to kind of bookend, because Abbott and Costello are kind of that same kind of humor,
Right.
and within a horror context. And so that's Ghost and Mr. Chicken kind of feels that way for me. Just a
I understand
gentle kind of something as kids would like, adults would like. It's spooky, but it's like Scooby-Doo spooky,
Right. And it holds that obviously the special place because of you and your grandmother
Sure.
watching that for you.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
But it does feel like a Scooby-Doo episode in that regard. Like, it's timeless for me.
Yeah, when I can recall it, you're right. It sure does feel kind of.
Yeah, and when you watch it again, you'll probably really like it. It's like we'll be 90 years old and we'll still watch Scooby-Doo and we'll still enjoy it.
Watch SpongeBob too and other stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's just something really special about this genre, the blending of genres. I love successful blending of genres. And these were movies that have done this well. There are movies out there that try and just fail. They just don't know how to blend them well together, or they try and it just doesn't work.
I think a brilliant, and it's a spoof on everything at that time, the movies that were going on Scream, and I know what you did last summer, but Scary Movie.
Okay.
Just hysterical.
Mm-hmm.
Hysterical.
Yeah.
I mean, really no horror elements. It's just it's making fun of all the huge horror hits that were at that time. And man, the Wayans brothers knocked it out of the park on that one. So I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners have seen that already, and I think they can agree. I think I've seen it like 2 or 3 times at the theater, and just with a friend, I was rolling every time, losing it. Just hysterical. So, I mean, it's like I said, not true comedy horror, but it's making fun. It's spoofing on all those films at that time. So,
I agree. Yeah, they've done some other really fun movies too, like I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker.
oh yeah.
Yeah, they're really smart, funny guys. Well, there it is, kids. We've talked about horror comedies, comedy horrors with comedy in them, comedy movies with horror in them. The whole gambit. I love the blending of genres. A whole other show we can do some time down the road. We'll do a blending of like sci-fi horror. That would be a great episode. There's a lot of talk.
I think another great episode would be Montag. We could do an episode on horror anthologies. Maybe our top, what we make our top horror anthology films of all time were, because I'm a big anthology horror film fan.
Right.
I like them. I got quite a few of them actually in my collection from the 70s and stuff like that.
Those were really big in the 70s. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're also going to like inappropriate stories for children.
Yes. The bone pile. The drowning pool.
A nip in the air.
Oh man.
That's gonna be great. And then the sausage. I don't really want to get the camera that close to your junk when you come walking in the scene. I'm gonna have to have someone be the DP on that one.
We need an extra wide lens. I'm gonna wear really, really, really tight, overly tight biker shorts.
Well, you're just gonna walk in your tidy whities, ka-tung, 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 ka-tung.
Walking all like, get a little strut. Have some like 70s poor music going, the funk music. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping to get Audrey. She was gonna be the honey or the honey pie, but we'll see. I doubt we can get Lauren to be honey pie, but that would be nice too.
Yeah.
This all has to get cut out. An hour and 41 minutes.
Yeah.
Leaving it
Absolutely. Get out there.
Okay. Well, there it is, kids. I think we've had a pretty good time. I'm sure we've missed handfuls of movies that are good examples, but we kind of covered a lot of movies that we both like, that are funny, that are horrific. So there it is. What do you want for nothing, right?
Yeah. If you have any suggestions, reach out to us.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Oh, I should probably do my commercial. I think I can probably do it from memory. You can get Unsane. Nope, I can't do it from memory. You can find Heavy Metal Horror at unsaneradio.com. You can listen to full episodes or download to your device. If you're on YouTube, that's where you're at. If you're watching Heavy Metal Horror Podcast on Facebook, Heavy Metal Horror Podcast. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you know someone who would like our show, tell them about us. I think that covers it pretty much up. And kids, we are going to be going to Roku. That's right. We're heading to a Roku near you. More details to follow. So this has been Montag, Master of Illusion, who feels awful naked because my headset's not working.
And this is Choptop, who noticed that Montag feels awful naked without his headset.
I know. What am I going to do? Oh.
There you go. Now, see, it's just that comfort feeling. It's like a serenity blanket, right? Yeah.
Serenity now. Serenity now.
Yes.
This has been Montag, and you've been watching and listening to Heavy Metal Horror Comedy.
Oh, great show. Great show.
Yeah, good show, buddy.
This is Doug Helvering, and you have been listening to Heavy Metal Horror, the best podcast that you've never heard before.